Alright, so it's been a couple of weeks since Pokemon Scarlet and Violet released, and as of such, a lot of people are already discussing what they think the inevitable DLC will add to the game. Now, I personally found the discussion around DLC to be really focused in people hoping that they sell us back solutions to the problems that they've created, like farming Terra Crystals being a huge slog, or the lack of a battle tower, Elite Four rematches, etc. However, I don't want to talk about that today, because that's a rant for another day. Today, I wanted to discuss something that has been present in Pokemon since Generation 6 with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire that, in my opinion, has progressively gotten more and more tedious and honestly kind of annoying. I am, of course, talking about legendary dumpsters, which is a phrase that I use to essentially describe the various generic methods of obtaining a bunch of different legendaries the same way. It started out with the Mirage Islands in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, where basically these random islands would appear and there'd be a Hoopa ring that you can interact with, and thus a legendary would form from the void. This one, as far as these dumpsters go, isn't too bad, as it does give you a sense of exploration and such. Then if you move to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, you have the Ultra Wormholes, which, while cool in concept, kind of fell flat for the generic worlds each wormhole holds outside of the Ultra Beast layers, which were pretty cool. Then Sword and Shield brought forth its Dynamax adventures, which again is a generic way to get a bunch of different legendaries. Then you had Reminisce Park in BDSP, which you'd think because that game had less legendaries, it'd actually consider having areas to find them, but whatever. Another type of dumpster that exists and has existed since Generation 6 as well, but is not necessarily exclusive to it, is the Mystery Gift. Now, obviously Mystery Gift has been around since before, but in something like Generation 3, when you got a Mystery Gift for a legendary, you'd do something like get the Eon ticket to find the other laddie and go to a different island, or go to Naval Rock to find Lugia or Ho-Oh, or Birth Island for Deoxys, etc. Gen 4 continued this trend with Darkrise Island, the Shaman event, the very unfortunate Cut Arceus event. Then Gen 5 had at least the Victini event, which was cool too. But ever since then, pretty much every mystery gift or special event Pokemon would just be handed to you in the Pokemart, or they would just throw it into whatever that game's generic gimmick was, like raids. So now that you know what legendary dumpsters are, let's discuss why I believe they exist, why they shouldn't exist in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and rant about them for a bit. So the obvious reason as to why these exist is just because there's so many legendaries, and presumably having a dungeon for every single one would be overkill. Sure, with Generation 1 there was 3 birds and Mewtwo, and even Gen 2 they made beasts roam and featured a dungeon for Ho-Oh and Lugia, but when you look at something like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, they at least had actual encounters with many of these legendaries rather than just having a legendary lottery. They even created cool areas to encounter, for example, the Weather Trio, which was pretty cool. The argument that there are too many legendaries and that's why they do this also kind of falls flat when you recognize that the aforementioned Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl added its dumpster instead of adding even small caves or side quests catered towards the legendaries. Furthermore, they could just have these types of areas for at least the leaders of each legendary trio, which would significantly cut down on the amount of areas they have to create rather than just putting every single Pokemon into the dumpsters, regardless of whom they are. They could even have it so that, let's say, one cave would cover all 3 legendaries. Like you have a labyrinth of sorts that on one side has a water area for Kyogre, on the other side has a ground area for Groudon, and then at the top has like a spot for Rayquaza or whatever. This type of stuff just adds immersion and wonder to the world, making it feel like something you're actually exploring. I know that Scarlet and Violet added these stakes that you could pull out of the ground to unlock certain areas, which is definitely cool, but if that's the only way to unlock any sort of interesting optional content, then it doesn't really make you want to explore the world, but rather just look up a guide on how to find the stakes. Being able to explore various aspects of the game and just stumble upon entire dungeons is something that many of the classic Pokemon games did beautifully, and it's a shame that legendary Pokemon have just been relegated to basically, here's your Pokemon, bye. With Scarlet and Violet being these open world games, I'm worried that the DLC will just bring forth Terra Raid legendaries and call it a day rather than filling the world with actual places to find them. In my opinion, this is something that should have been present in the base game anyways, considering the fact that while Scarlet and Violet's a lot of fun, I don't really feel the urge to explore, if not only to find certain Pokemon habitats, but having a bunch of dungeons, caves, side quests, and other types of ways to encounter these legendaries would really help fill this world with meaningful content. Simply adding all past generation legendaries to Terra Raids or some sort of similar legendary dump would honestly be a massive hit to what Gen 9 could and should be. Furthermore, if the DLC is anything like Sword and Shields, we can expect there to be 2 separate DLC packs, one for each version, relocating all of the Pokemon to a dumpster, then making them exclusive like in Sword and Shield would be pretty sus in my opinion. At least if they do have exclusive legendaries, which they will, they can at least have the legendary counterparts share areas, like if there's a cave with Dialga Dialga in it in Violet. There could be the same cave but with Palkia in it in Scarlet. That'd at least be something, and I think is a very reasonable expectation and hope. All that said, judging how each generation seems to treat past legendaries less and less legendary, I do have a feeling that we're going to have a lot of 7-star terror raids in Scarlet and Violet's DLC, and to me that's kind of disappointing. What do you guys think? What's the best way to handle all of these past legendary Pokemon? They've definitely put themselves in a weird position by introducing so many in some of the generations, to the point where it honestly got kind of ridiculous. So there's definitely many layers to this discussion, but I don't think absolutes are necessarily the answer. You don't necessarily have to have a dungeon for every single legendary, but you also shouldn't have every single legendary in a dumpster. But yeah, all that being said, let me know your thoughts and I'll see you next time. Peace.